All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Engineering Major Philosophy Minor. So today I decided, on my way to the store, I passed by a farmer's market, and I decided that I would come out, skateboard down here, check out some of the things that are going on, the local artwork, maybe check out some of the food options down here. And I thought that this would be a good opportunity to make a video for you guys explaining some of the reasons why I moved out of California. There's kind of one overarching reason, and then there's a lot of sub reasons there. And of course down here where I'm at, there is kind of like this railroad museum right here where they just have like a bunch of really cool historic freight and passenger train engines. This right here is obviously a steam engine. And since this is kind of an engineering related channel, I just want you guys to take a look at this, and you can get an idea of the size of how large the wheels were. They're actually a 6-foot diameter, just these giant steel castings. Back in the good old days where you could produce a bunch of steel and pollute as much as you want, basically. But anyway, let's go ahead and check out a couple of just like the local scenery and local items available at the farmers market, and then we'll get into talking about why I moved out of California. Alright guys, so now that we've checked that stuff out, let's go ahead and get into the reasons why I moved out of California. So I moved from California to the beehive state of Utah, and probably the central reason why I decided to move out of California is because the state really kind of stopped feeling like America. And I kind of will make a flippant remark sometimes where I'll tell people, I was fleeing communism when I left California. But in some ways that's a little bit joking, but in other ways that's a little bit serious. The state of California really did start to feel like a communist country, and so it just simply wasn't the kind of country that I wanted to live in. I want to tell you guys a couple reasons about why I felt like California was going in the direction of like some very socialist and really communist style trends, especially over the last year. So why do I make this kind of somewhat joking but somewhat serious remark? It starts off with onerous and prohibitively expensive taxes on many things: property tax, income tax, sales tax, and even taxes on energy like gas taxes, for example. So all of those things combined means that the cost of living in California is extremely expensive. Now, what happens is companies need to start paying higher salaries so that people can actually afford to live in the area. What happens when companies start having to pay higher wages is that the cost of housing goes up because people who are renting houses or building new homes or things like that have an incentive to start to upcharge because they know that people are making more income. Now, a lot of this is interrelated with other measures that California takes, like rent control and like excessive regulations on environmental things. And people might think, oh, the environmental stuff, that's just for the power company to deal with. But no, it's actually for individuals to deal with too, because anytime you want to make an improvement on your house or change something with your house, there's all sorts of environmental restrictions and regulations that you have to deal with in California. And an example of that is one of my family members recently wanted to just redo a bathroom in California. And I was helping the family do some research, and I compared a lot of the licensing and regulatory things between Utah actually and California, and the cost of the project just in terms of regulation, it was like half the expenses in regulation if you wanted to do the same bathroom remodel in Utah as in California. And so that also contributes to the extremely high housing costs, and it also means that people have a lowered incentive to actually improve their properties if they're renting. So if you combine all that stuff together, you've got potentially rent control, high taxes, high regulations, everything's insanely expensive. What happens is you get units that are incredibly old, incredibly run down, but still insanely expensive because nobody can afford to improve them, essentially. So I just talked about a reason to move out of California kind of on the individual level, and now I want to talk about one of the reasons why I moved out of California on kind of the more like business and entrepreneurial level, which is, what the government likes to do, and especially in California, is implement various like price and wage control regimes, especially when it comes to labor. So, one way the government can do this is with taxes. The other way is with things like rent control. You'll have people overpaying for properties that are really bad, and then people underpaying for, properties that, probably should be worth a little bit more. But to kind of move on from that, California has an insanely high minimum wage, and in Utah, what you tend to see is a lot of low-skill high school students, and even younger than that, teenagers, working in kind of these lower-skilled jobs, and this allows them to build work experience, make a little bit of money, and also learn a little bit about how to manage their finances and things like that. Hi. All right, guys, this quick little interruption there because this 6-year-old kid came up and he wanted to check out the trains, and so we waited and we watched the train with him and his dad. It was pretty sweet. So it was pretty cool that he came up here, because I remember when I was a kid, back in California, I used to always make my dad wait so I could watch 3 trains, and I'd always want to watch a 4th, and he'd want to take off, of course, because basically just making my folks waste time just for me to watch trains go by. But that was pretty cool. So what I was talking about before is when you increase the minimum wage, you get, what happens is you outcompete those lower skilled workers in the labor market. When I was a kid, I used to work for my dad. He owned a gardening business, and I would have to go out and I would have to dig holes, or I'd have to pull weeds or mow the lawn. Now, this is hard physical labor, no doubt. If my dad had to pay me, $15 an hour for a job that, is really only valued by the market at, say, $8, $9 an hour, then what he'd have to do is hire somebody who is, the best gardener around, as opposed to just letting me, a little 10-year-old kid, just help him pull weeds and stuff for whatever it was, like $8 an hour. I think he actually paid me 10, which, bless his heart, was above the minimum wage, but I was also his kid. But you could imagine a situation where, a business has to start paying higher and higher labor costs. That means that the cost of goods and services is going to go up, and that also means that the labor pool shrinks. You end up having to look for higher and higher skill levels for lower skilled jobs. So all of a sudden, in order to be a waitress, you're going to have a bachelor's degree or something like that. So that's one thing that I really like about Utah is, the labor market and price and wage control is a lot less prohibitive out here in Utah. There's some improvements that they could make for sure, like getting rid of the minimum wage entirely. And in fact, I really think that should be done at just the federal level as well. But it's really nice being out here, seeing kind of the correct skill level labor be applied to the correct skill level job. All right, guys, so the other big reason that I moved out of California that is worth talking about has to do with the lockdowns. Now, I have made other videos on my YouTube channel where I've talked about how I think the lockdowns were maybe one of the biggest mistakes in American history. And there's a lot of reasons for that goes back to, the things we were talking about with price and wage control. Essentially what happened in California is, the government wanted to be involved in literally every aspect of how the business was run. That was the ultimate consequence, dictating hours, dictating who can be open, dictating what goods and services could be sold, dictating what products were essential and non-essential. And, that led to a ton of issues in the business world. But at the individual level, there's something that happened, which I think for me was really what pushed me over the edge. And that was the culture of suspicion that all the lockdown measures created, especially surrounding mask wearing and now with vaccines and things like that. And on this channel, you know, we're working through the Gulag Archipelago, and a big thing that gets talked about in Soviet Russia is this culture of suspicion that was created among just average people. First off, you know, you didn't know if you could trust your average citizen because you didn't know if they were an informant or not. And then secondly, you couldn't trust your average citizen because maybe they were forced to become an informant. And what happened there is, you know, it created this situation where nobody really knew how to behave around each other because, you know, the most pedestrian action or the most average thing that you could do might make you end up in prison, you know. And it creates this culture where everyone is afraid of each other, and everybody assigns the most malicious motivations to the actions of others that are really just like normal behavior. You know, going on a hike outside and having people, you know, pull up their mask and give you a dirty look when you walk by, as if, you know, you simply just hiking in the same area is equivalent to, you know, committing like an act of violence against them, or, you know, considering something just like running on the opposite side of the street without a mask. You know, people looking at you as if that's an incredibly mean-spirited action and you're, you know, deliberately and intentionally trying to get them sick. You know, like you drive around California and you see these signs up saying like, you know, wearing masks saves lives. You know, as if you simply putting on a mask is, you know, somehow way more heroic than you just simply staying home if you're sick, or, you know, not deliberately trying to harm people by getting them sick. And, you know, I totally understand, you know, somebody should face repercussions if they're going around, you know, purposefully coughing on people and they are sick. But, you know, the thing is, like, that's such a small percentage of the population, you know, that is intentionally trying to do harm to people. And then, of course, what you had happen in California is, you know, you had them letting what were, you know, potentially violent criminals, or even, you know, like theft. I don't really want to be punished for just not wearing a mask when a thief can just get out of jail because they're worried about COVID spreading among people who we decided to remove from society anyway, because they were committing actual crimes. So, you know, in Utah, people are just a lot more relaxed about it. You know, like when I first moved out here, there was still a statewide mask mandate in place, but like if you forgot your mask, it wasn't like this giant issue, you know, whereas, you know, at the doctor's office in California, I would come in with a mask on, and then they were required to hand me a brand new mask. And if someone was really being anal retentive about it, they'd make you take off the mask that you were wearing to put on the mask that they gave you, or double up your mask. It makes us treat each other like, you know, we're disgusting, like germ-infested people who just have the worst intentions for each other, and that's just not the society that I wanted to live in. All right, guys, so we're gonna wrap up the video here pretty soon. This is gonna be the final reason. It's always been a career goal of mine to explore different, you know, all the different possibilities within the aerospace industry. So I've worked in commercial aerospace, I've worked in unmanned, kind of air-breathing systems, unmanned aircraft, but I never worked on spacecraft. Now, it would have probably been cool to try and work for a company like SpaceX, except that they were based in LA. I saw that out in Utah there was a job opportunity, started looking at my finances, looking at all the advantages, you know, looking at all the things that were making me upset about California. When I started researching, especially things like real estate and development out here in Utah, it just seemed like an opportunity that I really couldn't turn down. Now I am out here in Utah working on space systems. Come hang out in Utah, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.